All right, we left Joseph in the prison. Poor Joseph. He's been in the prison. I told Jason, I said, I'm doing this in real time. We're just going to leave Joseph in the prison for a while, He goes, yeah, I don't think you ought to do that. Well, so maybe not quite real time. But we left off with this verse, but the Lord was with Joseph. So, yes, he was in the prison, but he was still in a good place. Because actually, he was in a very good place. He was in the best place he could be because he was in God's will. And no matter what the world may think of that, we're in the best place we can be in when we're in God's will. Even though the world may look on it and go, boy, that's bad. we do too. This is bad. But it's not bad if we're in the center of God's will. And Joseph was. So the Lord was with Joseph, and he showed him mercy, and he gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. So we see God working his plan. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. This is in Genesis 39, for those of you that are following along. Does that sound familiar? Committed to Joseph everything that he had, everything in his hand. That sounds really familiar, doesn't it? Didn't this happen before? Imagine Joseph's going, this is kind of deja vu, Once again, the Lord was with Joseph, and because Joseph was in God's will, everybody around him was prospering, not just Joseph. Yes, Joseph was elevated to a better station. Now, granted, he was still a prisoner. And we find out later in one of the other verses, we find out that he was bound. So it's not like he was walking around chief, or anything. He was still bound in a prison, yet he was over all the other prisoners. So how he did that, I don't exactly, maybe there was a time where he was unbound to go take care of I don't know. But it does say in the next chapter in verse 3 that he was bound. So he was a prisoner, but yet he was in charge of the prisoners. And I think maybe the keeper of the prison, he's like, well, it's less work for me, Oh, yeah. I'll just let you do it. I get paid, but you do the work. Win-win. I don't know. But it was all part of God's plan. It makes no sense. To Joseph, I'm sure it didn't make sense either. Yet he trusted God. I heard a song on the radio this morning, and it said, I'm not afraid to trust him. And I thought, ooh, that's hard to say. Because sometimes I am afraid to trust him because I'm afraid he won't do it the way I want him to do it. And then I'll be disappointed. Or I'll feel like he let me down. And then I'll get mad. And that whole spiral. I'm not afraid to trust him. I was like, I got to think on that one for a while before I go say that, But like I said, and then it goes on even to say, the keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. So same thing as, remember Potiphar didn't even know what he had except the bread on his table? What prisoners are there? I don't know. Did we? Yeah, that's Joseph. Are they getting fed? I don't know. That's Joseph. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. I mean, you're the keeper of the prison. But he looked not to anything. Don't need to. He trusted Joseph. What does it take to trust a prisoner? He didn't know Joseph was innocent. We know he was innocent. He didn't know he was innocent. To trust a prisoner with all the other prisoners? I don't think I'd do that. That's like, trusting your 5-year-old to watch your kindergarten class while you leave the room, No. Yeah, exactly. That's good. And I've had teachers do that. Well, so-and-so was in charge. Okay, sure. And I'm trying not to laugh going, really? 5-year-old in charge of 5-year-olds. Yeah, that works well. A prisoner in charge of a prisoner. But that's the integrity that Joseph had. That's how much the Lord was with him and going through him, that people were just like, this is a good guy. I don't know why he's here. He's a good guy. And you know what? Everything he does basically turns to gold. So let him do it. I'd be that way. Hey, well, you can come do my work. You come do my work. Everything turns to gold. Nah, she's not bothering anybody. You're not bothering a bit. No. But we're going to kind of jump now because there's this long passage about the butler and the baker, and we're going to talk about them, but it's kind of, like I said, it's a long passage, so I don't want to go verse by verse because we don't have time to go verse by verse. But we know the story. The butler and the baker of Pharaoh. ended up in prison. I don't know what they did, but evidently they ticked him off. Like I said, it doesn't say what they did. It says basically that they offended him in some way. And back then, it didn't take much to offend. You look at them funny. They had ceremonial things. You walk into a room a certain way. You approach from the right, not the left, or the left, not the right. I mean, it was a big deal, and you don't follow the protocol, And then once you're in prison, then they decide what to do with you. Well, that's where the butler and baker were. In prison, offended somebody, Pharaoh, in some way. And they're in prison. Yay. What a great place to be, It's like servant is bad. Prisoner, definitely worse. Definitely worse. So they're there. And we know that they were there for a while and they had a dream. Each of them had a different dream. And we might go into their dreams next week. I'm not sure. Haven't got direction yet. But for now, let's just say they each had a very troubling dream. You ever had a troubling dream? I have weird dreams. Jason goes, I don't know what's wrong with you. He said, I worry about you because some of my dreams are just, they're bizarre. And I'm going, I don't know what's wrong with me. They're weird. But then some of them are just, sometimes you just have those scary dreams, where you just wake up and your heart's just pounding. It seems so real. Well, these two men had a scary dream, okay? They were weird, granted. They were very strange dreams, but they were troubling. They were very troubling dreams. And I want to pick up the morning after that dream. Like I said, we may go back to those dreams, but I want to pick up the morning after that dream. Because this is what the Lord laid on my heart this week. And I know why after this week's gone, has progressed. I know why. And Joseph came in unto them in the morning. So we obviously see that he can move about. And he looked upon them, and behold, they were sad. And he asked Pharaoh's officers, the butler and the baker, that were with him in the ward of the Lord's house, saying, Wherefore look ye so sadly today? Well, duh. Why would a prisoner be sad? Doesn't that seem like an odd question?
Yeah.
Why are you sad? I'm in prison. I'm in shackles. I don't want to be here. It's nasty here. I'm hungry. Why are you sad? That sounds like a really odd question. Duh, like I said, I'm a prisoner. And I'd love to see their faces. Because I imagine that they had that look. Huh? Why are we sad? We're prisoners. Aren't prisoners supposed to be sad?
No joy there.
Yeah. What is there to, and they didn't have prisons like we have nowadays. Where you can get cable TV and steak dinners and, your own gym and, this is a hole in the ground with dirt, You may have gotten a cot, but probably just had to sleep on the straw floor. Why am I sad? You know what crick I have in my neck, The smell. Oh, the smell. Can you imagine? Because there's no bathroom and you kind of have to just go there and, can you imagine? Why are you sad? Duh. I imagine they turned around and said, why aren't you sad? You're a prisoner just like we are. Why aren't you sad, Joseph? You sleep on the floor like we do, You're in this filth like we are. You're a prisoner. And according to your tale, Joseph, you were falsely accused. So why aren't you sad? And I thought about it. Here's some reasons that Joseph had to be sad. He was a prisoner. Okay? That's not a good thing. He had been falsely accused. Don't you hate it when you get punished for something you didn't do? Isn't that the most frustrating thing in the world? I didn't do anything. Why am I the one getting in trouble? I told my parents that a lot. I didn't do anything. Usually I wasn't. It's my poor brother who's the one who always got punished for things he didn't do because my sister and I would, oh yeah, he did it, Sorry, Lynn. But, he'd been falsely accused. I would have been mad. That makes me mad to be falsely accused of something. I've been falsely accused of things, and it makes me mad. I'm mad at the person who accused me, because how dare they? And I'm mad at the person who believed them, because how dare they think that of me? Do I not have a better reputation than that? Then of course I get mad at myself, because I'm thinking, do I not have a better reputation than that? I'd have been mad. He was bound. That's not comfortable, to be bound. And I don't know if it was just like chained to a wall or your wrist chained together. I don't know, but being bound is uncomfortable. And his future was unsure. They said they dump you in a prison, then they decide what to do with you. You could just stay in the prison till you rot. Literally. Or, well, let's behead you. Or, let's hang you. Or let's, we may let you go. We don't know. We don't know yet. Well, living with that every day, wouldn't that be wonderful? Not know if this is your last day to live. Wondering what's going to happen to me today. Are they going to behead me? Are they going to hang me? Am I going to... Why aren't you sad, Joseph? You're asking them, why are they? Why aren't you? But there's no record of Joseph being sad. Not one verse. Does it say he was disheartened or downhearted or downcast? Not one verse. Wow, that's a strong character. Well, look what it says, though, instead. Doesn't say he was sad. Doesn't say he was mad. It says that the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, the butler and the baker, and he served them. Who were they? Prisoners. Who was he? A prisoner. Why does a prisoner serve another prisoner? He didn't have to. It wasn't his job. Why? Joseph made a choice. It's the same choice we get to make every day. Many times a day. I can be mad and I can be sad. Or I can serve. You cannot do both. Try it. It doesn't work. Sad and mad is our selfish part. I'm mad. I have a right to be mad. So I'm going to be mad. Or, poor pitiful me, I'm so sad, look at the situation I'm in. It's all self-centered. It's all about me, poor pitiful me. Or how somebody did me wrong. When we're in bad circumstances, we become the most selfish people in the world. And I'm talking about Christians too. We become and our prayer life, think about what our prayer life does. We turn to God, but what's our prayer? Lord, help me and help my problems. And, what about everybody else? Well, they can pray for themselves. What about me? We get selfish and complain. Yeah, gripe. But Joseph said, well, I can complain and I can gripe. What good's it going to do? She's going to give me a bad attitude. It's going to hurt my testimony. For all these people standing around listening to me griping and complaining. Me talking about how good the Lord is one minute and the next minute, Well, that's real convincing. Or I can serve. Didn't Jesus say, he who would be greatest must become the least? You want to be the master? You have to serve. Guess what serving means? It means you think about others' needs before your own. Joseph was worried about him. Why are you sad? How can I help you? How can I make you better? What can I do for you? He was so much more concerned about their needs than his own needs. And I think that's a big part of why it says God blessed him and God blessed everybody around him. Because he wasn't trying to bless himself and take care of himself. He was letting God do it. I was reading a book this week and it was... She was talking about griping and complaining, and she made up a little, I don't remember if she made it up or somebody else made up this little test to kind of test how much you gripe and complain during the day. And what it is she has a bracelet, and she puts this little bracelet on, and she puts it on one arm. And every time she catches herself complaining, she has to switch it to the other arm, and then switch back. And then every time you have to switch it. I was like, oh man, I wouldn't get anything done all day. I'd be switching that bracelet all day long. I was like, Lord, help me. Yeah, when you think, complaining about it. Exactly. I'm going to keep switching this bracelet. But it was actually a guy that created it, because I remember now, because they did an interview with him, and he had been doing it for 6 weeks. And they had did an interview and said, so how are you doing? And he said, well, I'm happy to say, he said, that I can now make it 20 minutes without having to switch my bracelet. 6 weeks he had done this, paying attention. And he said, I'm happy to say I can now go 20 minutes. And I was like, oh, ouch. Because when you really start paying attention to what you're saying, even if you're just thinking it, yeah. I mean, preacher talked about that Wednesday night, It starts here, and then it just kind of works its way out. Well, it's still griping, and it's still complaining. And if we stop and think about it every time, and you start getting tuned into it because you're having to do that physical action of, I'm like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do the test. Because I know my computer gets frustrating, and I fuss at my computer. Hurry up. Do what I say. Stop doing stuff I don't say, You get frustrated with the dishes, or the dogs, or, it's like, there's always something to complain about. Joseph had plenty to complain about. But he wasn't switching his bracelet. his little chains, he wasn't switching them back and forth because he didn't have to. Because he was choosing service over sadness. And I kind of put the little thing there, sadness or service. We have a choice to make. Robin told us last week about Rusty. And I thought that was so fitting that she told us that last week because of this. Rusty's a lot like Joseph. In prison, something he didn't do, but he's stuck. And like Robin said, there's no chance of him getting out. I mean, we know with God all things are possible, but it's going to take a miracle of God to get him out. So Rusty could have made a choice. Fine. That's how God treats me. That's how I'll treat him. God didn't do anything for me. Why should I do anything for him? But he did. And look at what he's doing. Look at the ministry he has. How many people have been saved in that prison? People that nobody else would reach. Nobody else could reach. That he's reached because of where he is. We look at it and say, it's horrible. Because we hate to see somebody go through what he's been through. And to be in a place like that and separated from their family. But God is using him in such a mighty way, just like he used Joseph. And Rusty has done the same thing that Joseph did. He said, I can be mad and sad, or I can serve. And how many souls has he brought to Jesus because of that decision? How many people are we going to impact this week with our choice? Because both choices have an impact. Our sad and mad has an impact. Usually it makes those people around us sad and mad too. Or they don't want to be around us. Yeah. I mean, I've had people, I'm just like, I don't want to be around you because you make me want to hang myself. I mean, they do, because it's one sad. Jason had a house to clean the other week. And he saw it on the schedule. He goes, oh, man. He said, I don't want to go clean her house. And I said, why not, baby? I said, usually when he doesn't want to, it's because it's just a nasty house, And so it's one of those nasty ones. He goes, no. He said, it's one we do regularly, so it's good and clean. He said, it's not that. He said, but that one. He said that woman won't shut up. And I was like, Jason. He goes, no. It's not that she talks. He said, it's that she complains the whole time I'm there. I'm trying to clean, and well, my health's been bad, and this and that, and she just whines and complains, and he's just going, just get me out of here. It does. It brings other people down. And we don't want to be brought down. We have enough bringing us down. We don't need help. But when we serve others, when we do things for others, don't you know how much that lifts them up? How much of a difference that makes when they see that attitude of Christ living through us? So we have a choice this week. And I have to quit because we got to get over to choir. But we have a choice to make. And we have to make it every day, many times a day. This is my situation. What am I going to choose? I can be sad and mad, which is what that's our default setting. It's kind of where we float anyway. Or we can make that conscious decision of, no, God has me here. God knows I'm here. He put me here for a reason. And let me find out what it is and let me serve. How much better would life be I'm not saying we wouldn't have bad days, because we would. Because sometimes God has to put us in bad days. Huh, Joseph? But he has a reason. And sometimes we're just too stubborn to let him work through us. But God, I'm mad. Well, good for you. Now get over it and do what I told you to do. Do the work I have for you. Get over it. It's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy. Please understand, I am not saying it's easy. But it is possible. We have proof. Joseph is proof. It's possible. Rusty's proof. It's possible. We can do it, but it's going to take that conscious effort and decision. No, I'm not going to be mad. No, I'm not going to throw my pity party. I'm going to serve. I'm going to serve. So let's keep that in mind as we go about our day today. I know I need to.